Hey, it's MJ from Selling the ATL Studios. Thank you for coming back. This video, we're going to talk about sales killer number 2. But before I do, I was reading an article that was talking about a guy in Ecuador who dug up a 5-foot worm, or it may have been a bunch of guys actually, because it was a 5-foot worm. And it got me thinking of what kind of fish could you catch with a 5-foot worm. And I'm saying that in jest, but it's a really good metaphor for finding a buyer for your home. And what I mean by that is, for instance, last video we talked about the hook, and we talked about professional photographs, we talked about videos, we talked about copywriting, making sure you have that all those 3 things locked in, and that gets you a shiny, sharp hook. But as you know, you can't just throw a hook in the water and expect to catch a fish. You need to have bait, and a 5-foot worm will work for a really, really big fish, which is what we're trying to catch when we're marketing our houses. So what does that have to do with you? Well, in the home selling world, the 5-foot worm is a solid promotion strategy. And there's a lot of promotional strategies out there. I'm going to share with you the one that I use. It's 4-pronged. The first prong of my promotional strategy is multiple channels. A lot of people will throw a sign in the yard, maybe put some balloons on it, and maybe put an ad in Craigslist or somewhere, and that'll be that. I use usually up to 10 marketing channels, sometimes more depending on the house that I'm selling. But it's important to use multiple channels, not just 1 or 2. Some of the channels that I use are social media, database marketing. I call a lot of agents. I spend a lot of time talking to agents because agents typically are working with buyers. So I spend a lot of time talking to them. And then there's a few other channels that we can get into. If you're curious, you can just hit reply on this and I'll get back to you. The next one is effective advertising. So you have to advertise a lot more today than maybe you had to in the past because there's so much information out there, and you have to know where to advertise to get the biggest bang for your buck. Now, personally, I get the biggest bang for my buck on Facebook because I'm able to kind of target the specific buyer that I know is probably going to buy the house that I'm marketing for my clients. I also spend a lot of time on my database because I have a pretty large database, and so I let everybody know that I'm selling a house and this is what I've got, because you never know who knows somebody at church or work that might need to buy their house. So I spend a lot of time on those 2 things, but I also have a few other advertising channels that I use, again, depending on what house that I'm trying to sell. The third thing is, and it probably should be number 1 because in my opinion it's the most important, and that is massive action. A lot of people will just do one-off advertisements, one-off phone calls, and then that's it, and they'll sit back and they'll cross their fingers and they'll hope that somebody's going to call them about their house. That doesn't work. You have to call, you have to call again, you have to call again, you have to advertise again and again and again. You have to market to your database, you have to do all those things, and you have to do it a lot. This is all I do, that's all I do. And so my marketing works, I think, in large part because of the massive action that I create around my promotional strategies for my listings. The last prong that I have is equally as important, I think, and that is you have to have measurable results. Now, I am a numbers geek. I have an MBA in finance, and so everything that I have is spreadsheeted, and I know exactly how much money I'm spending at each time and what results I'm getting from each dollar that I'm spending. And I think that's very, very important. A lot of people overlook that because you got to know where you're spending your money and where you're getting the most bang for your buck. I know where that comes from now because I've been doing this for a little while. But if you're doing this by yourself, you got to make sure you're keeping track of how much money you're spending for your advertising, because you're going to spend hundreds of dollars probably, and you want to know which one's giving you the best return so that you can spend more money on that particular channel versus one that's not getting you anything. So those are kind of the 4 prongs of the promotional strategy that I use. Again, I'm not saying it's the only one. It's the one that works for me. It's the one that's most effective for me, and it's one that I would say you're welcome to use if you'd like. This sales killer is probably one of the ones that most people fall into for a couple reasons. One, because it's hard. It's a lot of work. It's practically a full-time job. Like I said, this is all I do. And then 2, it's a little risky. If you don't know where to advertise, if you don't know where to spend your time marketing your house, you're gonna waste a lot of time. You're gonna waste a lot of dollars. on those advertising spots and on those marketing channels that you may not get results. So a lot of people are probably a little bit nervous about that, with losing money, losing time, and then like I said, it's a lot of work. So those are kind of the 4 things. Like I said, next time we're going to talk about sales killer number 3. In the meantime, if you take a look at the link below or on the bottom of the email that I sent you, it's to that article that's got the dude holding a 5-foot worm. So you got to check that out. That's a big worm. I think that's it for this time. I'll talk to you next time. This is MJ from Selling the ATL, and I'm out.